We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. Big up Christmas time, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Christmas cheer. Not all of you even celebrate Christmas, but big up everybody who has come to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast Christmas Eve live show. People are eagerly sitting wherever they are in the world thinking, when is Santa coming to visit me? But we have come to visit you by offering you this live show. Put down the Christmas film. Pay attention to what Caribbean Cricket Podcast is saying. Welcome, everyone. Ho, ho, ho. My name is Machel and Santokie of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And with me as ever is a partner in crime, Santokie Nagilandran. Santokie, how you doing?
Yeah. Mash, as we always say at the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, expect that unexpected. We're probably the only two guys doing a live stream podcast in the late hours of Christmas Eve. We're here. Our passion for West Indies cricket can never be questioned. We're here, Mash. More importantly, we're here to look at West Indies' iconic 3-2 victory against England in the T20 series. It was Thursday night where we lifted the trophy in Trinidad, securing that big win over England heading into 2024 and ensuring West Indies fans had something to smile about at the end of the year. And I think, Machel, before we get into, the details and the nitty-gritty of performances and stuff like that, I think credit has to go to Daren Sammy and captain Rovman Powell, because not only this series in isolation, if you factor that into the bilateral T20 series win against India and against South Africa, which was away, I think to their credit, within the space of, let's say, compare it to this time last year, I think whereas this time last year we were saying West Indies were down bad in T20 cricket, I think whilst we're not favourites for the T20 World Cup, based on what they've done this year, I think we definitely can be in the conversation as to potential winners of the World Cup. And I think that's a massive credit to the job they've done.
Hold on. What did you just say? Did you?
I said...
You're saying we're out there.
Listen, I said, if you're thinking... If you're thinking of the World Cup next year, yeah, if you had to name 4 teams, yeah, West Indies could be in that conversation. Whereas I think this time last year, you wouldn't even consider it. I think if West Indies, if you're beating South Africa, India, and England in bilaterals ahead of a home World Cup in 6 months, you have to be in a conversation, Mesh.
Okay, before we even get into the series, then let's start here. What is your bare minimum acceptable performance in a home World Cup? Bare minimum, because I think I've got a different minimum to you.
I think if you're the host in the World Cup, are you talking from just in general any host of a World Cup?
No, West Indies. So 6 months time, 7 months time at home, what would be deemed an acceptable performance in the World Cup?
I think if you're realistic, I'd say getting to the Super 8s is a minimum. That's a minimum. If you're a stakeholder in West Indies cricket or part of the coaching staff or one of the players, I think you'd say semi-finals.
What's your minimum?
My minimum would be a Super 8s. I can't say semi-finals is a minimum. It would be a surprise if they get there, but based on the performances this year, they can be in a conversation as to getting that far.
So in 7 months' time, if we go into our home World Cup and you see people in the Caribbean, because they've already started. I've seen people in the Caribbean media already saying West Indies are one of the favourites of the World Cup. And all I'm thinking in my head is there's 7 months to go. That's 7 months of kind of madness happening,
You know what? It's like I said, this time last year, you wouldn't even consider it. Like, we wouldn't even talk about it. But what I said was they can be in that conversation. As if someone said West Indies could win the World Cup at this point in time, it's not as outlandish as it would have been last year.
Okay, that in that context, in the context of it's not as outlandish as last year, yes, I will accept that. Is it right of me then to say that my bare minimum expectation, because If you add up what we did in 2021 and 2022, we won a total of 2 games, right? So my bare minimum expectation is to win 2 games in our home World Cup.
Ooh.
Now, in 2022, we didn't even get out of round 1. In 2021, we only won 1 game.
All right, so if you were to say, all right, if you had to pick 3 teams who you would say were favourites for the World Cup, in 7 months' time, who would you pick in? Who are you picking? I'm not expecting you to say West Indies, but if you had to pick the 3.
England, Australia, just because they're Australia. You just have to throw them in the conversation regardless. And then anybody. After those 2, anybody.
Right.
So I see point, not context, anybody comes into conversation. Do you know the reason why I'm not putting West Indies in the conversation? Because, and hear me out here, I am not denigrating the fact that they've beaten South Africa, India, and England all in 1 calendar year, right? That's fantastic, utterly brilliant. We've got to big up everybody. But it's one thing to win a bilateral series where you get 5 goals at beating a team. It's another to enter a World Cup where it reaches do or die situations on a regular basis. We just saw what happened to us at the World Cup qualifiers, right? That was we in the World Cup qualifiers, after we lost to Zimbabwe early on, we entered 2 do or die situations, right? Netherlands and Scotland, and lost both, right? So I think just a World Cup context at home where we've got our own cuss out crowd watching, it's a different dynamic to a 5-match bilateral series. That's not me saying the team can't do it. Of course they could shock everybody, and of course they could go deep in the World Cup. I just think that for me, with 7 months to go and any number of players who could get dropped from West Indies team or do a madness or say they don't want to play for West Indies, there's too much happens in a month-by-month basis for the West Indies for me to think that 7 months from now I can say, yeah, everything's going to be all right. Everyone's going to be fit. Everyone's going to make the World Cup. So I'm just spreading a bit of caution based on that regard.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say West Indies are favourites. My thing is, this time last year, if someone had asked me, what do you think about West Indies at the World Cup in 2024, I would say, you know what, man, it's got to be damage limitation. As long as we can get 1 or 2 wins, it's going to be embarrassing. Whereas now, if someone said to me, I wouldn't class them as favourites. I'm with you. I think Australia, England, potentially India would be the favourites at World Cup. But if someone said to me, West Indies could win the World Cup, I wouldn't laugh it off. I'd be like, well, they've been on a good run in these home T20s in the build-up at a clutch moment. They've got Dre Russ back. Things seem to be coming together. So I just think they're in the conversation. They're not favourites, but they're in the conversation. Whereas I think this time last year, it wasn't feasible. Anyone even imagined they could potentially even win a World Cup.
Who have we got left before the World Cup? I know we got Australia away. Who's after that?
And then we got South Africa right before it starts. 3 T20s against South Africa.
So this is the other thing, and don't get me wrong, we're not the only team in this situation, but 6 T20s in 7 months, and then basically a camp before World Cup. So, it's just a lot of variables at play there.
Yeah. I think what South Africa and I think it was South Africa, maybe England have said essentially they're not looking at bilaterals to develop the squad. It's the IPL. Like the IPL games are where players are going to get that run of T20 games. So I guess it could be, I forgot how many of the West Indies, 11 are in. I think it's about 7 are in the IPL. So it'll essentially be based on form and momentum built in the IPL. I think the bilaterals, 3 in Australia, which are away, so they're not really going to play any relevance in terms of conditions and things. And so you're really looking at the 3 bilaterals against South Africa right in the build-up. So that's not really anything. So I think the IPL is going to be massive for all teams to kind of develop that momentum and kind of get used to playing the format on a regular basis in the build-up to the World Cup.
Well, you know what? We as ever, people, that wasn't how we planned to start the show. We just go wherever the vibes is taking us. That was never the plan for the start of the show. We see the comments. I saw a lot of comments I wanted to bring up, but Santokie and I were just riffing off the back of things. There's one comment. Let me see if I can go back and find it. This wasn't about what we were talking about. But
oh, man. Man said, listen, the whole of the world are out here celebrating their families. Machel and Santokie in some dark rooms, recording a podcast.
Door locked, recording podcasts on big Christmas Eve, That's, but I think the best way to go through this, because obviously there were some really good positives. You cannot turn your nose up at 3-2. Now, let's start here. Let's start with this point, actually. Before we look at the West Indies team, let's start with this point. England were missing the following players who you think may or may not be in a World Cup squad in 7 months' time. Johnny Bairstow, Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer, and Mark Wood. You would assume that those four are starters. Cameron Ponsby, who writes obviously for ESPN, did work for TalkSport during this series as well. He recorded something for TalkSport, which I thought was a very good point he made. It was much longer than this one sentence I'm going to say. But his basic point was 8 of the World Cup winning team was actually in the Caribbean. So he was like, this idea that West Indies were playing a weakened England side, he said, I'm not buying that. It wasn't a brand new England side. Yes, they're missing some fundamental players, but it wasn't a weak England side, so to speak. Do you think we have to put an air of caution on our achievements in regards of the fact that there are certain players who walk straight back into this England side? And similarly, Santokie, when we beat India in the summer, there were certain players who you may say, well, they walk into India's T20 side. So how much caution or how much relevance do you put on that?
Yeah, I think with India, it was essentially a reserve squad because they were saving their players for the ODI World Cup. With this England squad, I think like you said was referenced on TalkSport. You had the likes of Butler, Harry Brook, Liam Livingstone, Moeen Ali. All guys who will be starting, who were in the last World Cup final, will be starting the World Cup next year, assuming they're not injured. So you've already got a core of a strong squad. And then when you think about it, the guys that they did bring in, Phil Salt, well, we know what he did. Will Jacks, in some ways, you could argue, if a Joe Root or Ben Stokes played, they could have done. They're the guys who are going to start. But these new guys, Will Jacks, Phil Salt, they had the additional motivation of using this tour to kind of cement a place in the World Cup squad. So essentially, that added dimension of having a core squad of first-team players along with youngsters who were hungry meant it had added extra spice for England. I think they had players who were really wanted to get it and put their names out there, which Phil Salt did. So I think to say it was an understrength England team isn't. I wouldn't agree with that. I would say essentially it was when you have the core of them first team players anyway, and then the talent England have, they can call on quote unquote reserve players who are just as good and world class. So I think it was a very, very strong England side, and I don't think you can you can't really mark West Indies down for that. It was a very strong England side, and it was a credit to them that they did manage to pull off the win in the end.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that the best player in the series was Phil Salt, who went into that series not even guaranteed of necessarily starting for England come 7 months from now. So you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't on one hand say it's a weakened England side, and then on the other hand accept that but Phil Salt was obviously the best player across both teams. So it is what it is. I always buy into the mantra, which is what I always say in football. You can only beat what's in front of you. Don't worry about who was playing, who wasn't playing. Can you beat them? Yes or no? And fundamentally, that's all that West Indies need to answer. Now, Tom Miller does make this point though. Rashid. So Tom says the caution for me is how they struggled versus Rashid. Top class leggy. Most teams will have one at the World Cup, and we don't necessarily play top class leg spin easy. Do you remember when South Africa came to us before the 2021 World Cup and Shamsi was just bowling every time he came to bowl, he was doing 4 overs, 2 for 13. So I get Tom's point that we still haven't found a way to know how to navigate or negotiate a top leg spinner. Rovman Powell at times against Rashid looked like he didn't even know what the ball was doing. So I get Tom's point in that regard, Santokie. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's a very, very good point. And then even worse, we didn't even play Yannick. So we're not even utilizing a leg spinner in our squad when we know it's going to be effective across those games at the World Cup. So that is a massive weakness and a concern. Like you said, Mash, there were positives, but it's not like we're saying it was a 5-star performances. There were obviously glaring weaknesses. So I think, where should we start? I think, Mash, it's only right we talk about Dre Ross. Obviously, got a recall to the West Indies side. You rightly said in the preview shows we did, he was picked because he was taking wickets in CPL, basically. He was a wicket taker at the death, and he took 7 wickets. He was the leading wicket taker for West Indies in this series. Contributions with the bat, ironically, his big performance when he hit 51 was when we lost trying to chase down the 267. So he was definitely more handy with the ball. But I just felt, Mash, Dre Ross, the sort of standards he has and that aura and the presence sort of galvanized the side as well. It was very noticeable that West Indies had a Dre Ross in that side for this series.
Yeah, before I even go into Dre's performances, what I would love to know, Santokie, the last time Dre played for us was at the 2021 World Cup. What happened in between? We won't get too much into it, but effectively, Santokie, it took Daren Sammy coming back as head coach and 2 years later to convince Dre Ross, we still want you to play for the West Indies, which tells me that bad mind was at play when it was coming to Dre Ross. That people, because remember, Santokie, people kept on saying, selectors kept on saying, we've looked past him now. We don't think like his time is done. So I just find that whole thing fascinating, and it almost speaks to the chaos in West Indies cricket, that all it took was a new head coach who played with Dre to understand Dre's importance, as opposed to selectors writing him off, people around the region writing him off, saying he can't bring nothing to West Indies cricket anymore, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm glad that you started with the 7 wickets, because like you say, the whole reason why I thought Dre should get recalled is because I think people underestimate Dre's utility or usefulness with the ball. Yes, there was the second, or is it the third T20 where he got completely licked down. Fair, it happens, but he came back well. Just to give people the stats, Dre took 7 wickets at 28 apiece, an economy of 10.46, right? Now, obviously, people say that economy is too high, and yes, you don't want it to be over 10s, but I'd gladly take the 7 wickets if he's going to go on economy of 10, right? And then obviously, as you said, Santokie, with the ball, Dre scored 105 runs, so he was the 5th highest run scorer for the West Indies in the series, with 150, and he went at a strike rate of 169 in compiling those 105 runs. Here's a question mark I've got for you, Santokie, about Dre. I do not believe that Andre Russell, Jason Holder, and Romario Shepherd can all play. I only think 2 of them, if they're all fit, I think only 2 of them fit into this side. I think if you play all 3, you're blocking someone's position. Because remember, Gudakesh Santokie only came into the team after Romario Shepherd got injured. And then over the course of this series, alongside Akil Hussain, him and Akil have basically said, well, neither one of us can be dropped, right? So when Romario comes back and rightly takes his place back in the side, one of Holder or Dre has to go. Do you see it that way or not, Santokie?
Yeah, I see it that way, and it's clear it would have to be Holder at this point. You surely go with Dre Ross and Romario as your 2 all-rounders based on the form that they've both shown. So I think that's a great point, Mash. I think Holder is in danger of a long-term drop if everyone stays fit. I don't see how he sort of fits in just because his all-round skills. You can only fit 2, as you said, and we've got 3 competing for that. It'd be interesting to see, like, if we ever see Fabian Allen sort of in the next 7 months, if he puts his name in the hat, because we know what he can do, and that will add further questions, good questions for West Indies selections. But I just think with Romario and Dre Ross, you've got to go on them based on their form. And the fact, more importantly, what we mentioned earlier, the fact they're both in the IPL as well means they'll be getting that game time. I feel it's going to be a massive disadvantage to Jason Holder to have March, April, and May where he's not playing T20 cricket. So I can envision Jason Holder not being in that 11 for the first game of the World Cup next year.
Now, I thought you'd say Holder, so then I'll say this about Holder. Does that mean then that Holder's press release or statement that he released saying, well, boy, I'm not going to Australia because I'm trying to solidify my place in the West Indies T20 side. I need to play as much T20s as possible. Do you buy that as... So at the time I said, Holder's just making excuses. He wants to make his money, which is fine. But do you buy now, or do you think that actually he may have a point? That the only way he's going to force his way into a West Indies side at full strength is if his T20 form in whatever leagues he plays is so exceptional that he has to come in as an automatic pick? Or do you think he was just trying to style it out as a way to get to play T20s?
No, I think Jason Holder would definitely be worried about his spot, mainly because he hasn't got the IPL deal. You know, what we see with T20 selections is it's of all the formats, it's the most that relies on recency bias. So Jason Holder will sort of be a out of sight, out of mind thing. If he's not playing any T20 cricket, there's no other tournaments going on during the IPL. So he's essentially going to be, he could be playing county cricket, which will be 4-day. So he won't be putting his name out there in terms of T20 performances. Whereas if we see Romario and Dreyfus, get the headlines in IPL, that recency bias, that momentum based on their form as well that they've shown in the past few months and series, means that Jason Holder essentially has to play as much T20 cricket as he can across January and February to sort of cement his place in the squad. And I think that's why he opted out of the test side fundamentally.
Interesting. Certainly going to be interesting. So that's the Dre issue. We've kind of addressed Holder at the same time. Let's go to the top of the order. We started the series with King and Mayers. We ended the series with King and Charles, right? So just to give people the stats, because none of the openers, well, no, that's a lie, because King scored an 82. So Brandon King, 5 innings, 115 runs. So he was the 4th highest run scorer. Highest score of 82. He went at a strike rate of 153, obviously 150. Kyle Mayers, 4 innings, 64 runs. Strike rate of 142. He only averaged 16. Top score of 35. Johnson Charles played 1 innings, scored 27, strike rate 123, obviously, and he scored 27. Now, I think we've got an opener issue, Santokie. Really and truly, based on form over the last possibly year, not in T20 franchise cricket, I'm talking about for West Indies, there is an argument to say that Kyle Mayers should be dropped.
Yeah.
Whether that argument means that Johnson Charles should play instead of Kyle Mayers is another story altogether. I think West Indies would ideally like to go right-hand Brandon King, left-hand someone. West Indies do not have a 6th bowler in their side if one of those 5 bowlers gets licked down. That's probably why Mayers was still in the team, right? Because he offers that option. Of all the things that we left this series with as a weakness, and it was the one thing I spoke about on one of the things I spoke about on Talk Sport, we have, as much as we've only got 6 games, we also need to find an opener. If I'm Desmond Haynes, Santokie, I'm reaching out to Evan Lewis and I'm trying to break bread. I'm trying to make peace with him and find a way, or Daren Sammy, I'm not just saying Desmond Haynes, find a way to see where Evan's head is at and get him back involved in West Indies cricket. Or do we just go Johnson Charles or Spice Man? Like what options do we have? But those are what options do we have then?
Yeah, no, listen, the opener problem we've been down bad in the opening positions, like you said, for at least a year. It's just the fact the middle order, like Pooran, Rovman, they've essentially been covering up for it by hitting big knocks, which essentially has covered up the deficiencies. But I think neither King or Mayers have been hitting consistently. As you said, King hit an 82 in one of the games, but consistently he wasn't scoring. Mayers, I think, like you said, he's extended his stay just because his ability with the ball, he could bowl as well, kind of kept him in. But the fact that we dropped Mayers and we went to Johnson Charles, who I thought we'd never see again in West Indies colours. And I don't think Johnson Charles is someone who he can hit, 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 innings. He can hit a big innings, but he's never going to be consistent. You can kind of predict his game. I think in a World Cup, he'll get found out very, very quickly. And I don't really think West Indies selectors would see him as a long-term opener building up to that World Cup. I just think there was no one else to call on. So Evan Lewis, I think, it needs to get a call from Desmond Haynes. However, we know Haynes owes a lot of people phone calls. I don't know when that's going to come. But we don't have a world-class opener, someone who can come out and we can know, this guy's going to hit quick 20, 30 runs straight off the bat and sort of have the opposition bowling scrambling. We just don't have that. I think King and Mayers aren't international quality T20 openers. And I think that's reflecting the fact King has never had an IPL deal, for instance. I think the IPL is a good gauge of sort of what level your batters are or players are. Mayer's, like I said, the golden army, he's handy with the ball. So that kind of has given him the added advantage in terms of securing IPL deals. But I just think well, this is the thing. So Athanaze looks good playing T20 cricket. He looks like he could go in that role, but he's sort of been hindered by being a multi-format player. He's got to play the tests in Australia. And I don't think there's enough of a window after that for him to make a mark in T20 cricket. He's not got an IPL deal, obviously. So where would he even make his mark? He's not playing any franchise cricket. So I think Athanaze is ruled out. Spiceman, I think, is ruled out. I think for whatever reasons they've decided. You know, when it was it 2022? Yeah, last year, when it was sort of a head-to-head between Charles and Spiceman as to who got that call up. They obviously went for Charles. So I think Spiceman's gone. Mash, I just don't know who else you could call to. I don't think Evan Lewis, he's been out the side so long. I don't think he's going to come back. The middle was, if Hetty wasn't the thing is,
you know what? That's not as crazy a shout as it sounds, you know, because right now Hetty can't get back in this team. Even if he wanted to, he can't get back in his team. So I'm not saying that I agree with Osprey's idea about Athanaze, but this is the problem with only having 6 T20s before the World Cup, right? And then we're looking at, even if you look at the recency bias of T20s around the world, how many of our players actually open? Really? So you're looking at what, Santokie? King, Mayers, Charles, who may not even open, Spiceman, Rakeem Cornwall, maybe, but he only tends to open in CPL. Evan Lewis, obviously, we know about. Kadima Lane, did he open? No, he didn't even play in CPL. He just opened for CCC and Super 50, right? So they would have to either move somebody who traditionally plays in the middle to open and be a pinch hitter, or they're going to have to play Charles or Mayers. We don't, or as I said, break bread with Evan Lewis. We don't have options sometimes. We just don't have options, and we don't have time to work out an option. If you see what I mean.
You know what? I would have liked to have seen Jimbo, Rakeem Cornwall as opener, because I think based on what I've seen when St. Lucia at CPL, he's the exact sort of opener you need. He just goes from ball one. He just tees off basically, and that's what we're sort of lacking. I think King and Mayers, they take time to see themselves in, and they essentially play almost like their middle order batters. They don't play like explosive openers. Whereas Lewis as well, someone who can come out and just hit the ball from the get-go. We don't have that sort of pinch hitting role. Even someone like a Narain, how we used to play, you know, that pinch hitter. We're just lacking that. So I can see it in the World Cup. I can see us going with King and Charles just because the lack of options and the conservative nature sometimes with selection. I just see it going down that route. But there needs to be some sort of SOS calls made to Evan Lewis. Like, it's desperation mode to get Evan Lewis in the side just because of his skill set and what he knows. But I don't know. There doesn't seem to be much urgency, Mash. Whenever we've been in press conferences and Haynes has been asked about Lewis, there's not really much urgency about the need for him to get back into the side, or that there's been any real sort of consistent attempts to communicate with him and get him back in the side. The last we heard, what was it last year? He was doing up his house or something, so he wasn't available.
I mean, and in fairness, we got to keep it real. Evan was down bad in CPL, but then part of me also thinks, okay, he was down bad in CPL, but desperate times, desperate measures. Sometimes, in the same way how Desi was like, we're investing in Carty and Athanaze, and Carty had a terrible Super 50. Sometimes you just have to invest in someone and say, you know what, we're going to use you because we know what your ceiling is higher than everybody else's ceiling. So we're just going to bring you in, right? It doesn't matter what you did in CPL, come through. But we know it won't happen, or it's very unlikely to happen. But that would be my go-to suggestion if the selectors ask me about what should they do about their opener problem. Moving on. So where we did shine, and probably where we won this series, is the strength of our top to middle order, right? So just going through some people. So at number 3, Shea Holt, he left it late to play his best innings of the series, which obviously won us the series, the 43 not out in the final T20. He scored 122 runs, with a strike rate of 118. So he had the worst strike rate of the top 6, but that almost doesn't matter because Holt's role is to be the glue guy. He can accelerate if needed, but he's to be the glue guy to play whatever the situation requires at that particular moment in time. And that's why Santokie, I was never doubting that we'd win the final game, because when Hope came in, I think I turned to Alex Tudor and Steve Harmison and just said, he just needs to play an ODI innings here and we'll win the game. And that's precisely what he did. He just went into ODI mode and said, you know what, let me just if I'm there at the end, we must win this game. It's pretty much what Shai Hope, how he treated that. At number 4, we had Puran. Puran hit a high score of 82. I think it was in the game that we lost, actually. He scored 149 runs. He was our top run scorer, actually. 149 runs. Strike rate, he had the highest strike rate in the series for us. 180. At 5 was Rovman. Rovman scored 132 runs, top score of 50. I think he was good in the first 2 T20s in particular. Top score of 50, strike rate of 174. Number 5 was initially Hetmeyer. We'll get to him in a minute. He flopped, and he was replaced by Shafane Rutherford, who had a top score of 36, strike rate of 170, scored 95 runs in his 3 innings. So that was our 3, 4, 5. We spoke about Dre Russ and Hold already. So that was our 3, 4, 5, including Hetmeyer, who got dropped. Would it be right then, Santokie, to say that's actually no? That's our 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, Rutherford was 6. Yeah. Would it be right to say that was a strength of our team once Hetmeyer left the side?
Yeah, definitely. I think Puran, you know what you're going to get from him. He showed his quality. World-class batsman. I think that his strength is at 3, so I wouldn't even think about him as an option to potentially open. I think Puran's strength is at 3 for coming in just after we've lost the opening wicket. With Hope is an interesting one because I can see the benefits of him. As you said, he's composed. He sort of adds that calmness to the innings if things are going, if we're losing wickets at the other end. He sort of adds that composure. He can play spin very well. However, I just think we're also limited with Hope because, okay, he could play at ODI innings there because we were chasing 133. If a team posts 200 and we're chasing that, is Hope the guy who can sort of accelerate at the pace needed? Or is he someone who's going to soak up balls and hold you down? So I just think Hope can be beneficial in certain situations, but at a World Cup where most teams are probably going to be scoring at, 170, 180 plus in their innings, is Hope the guy who can sort of accelerate along with that? I haven't seen it so far, but I'm hoping the fact that he got an IPL deal means he'll gain some of that advantage if he plays games, those sort of match situations, and maybe be able to accelerate more. So for me, Hope batting at 4 is a slight concern just because I don't know if he has the tempo to keep up with in most T20 matches.
I think that's fair enough. And something that people might not know, until that 43 that Hope scored in the final T20, he actually wasn't having a strong series, and it was enough for me to I said when I turned up for the 5th T20, Hope needs a good knock today. So and this again, it's the recency bias of how you end a series versus how you start a series, right? Brandon King started the series with an excellent 82 and then flopped for the remaining 4, so everyone assumes he had a bad series. Hope had an okay couple of matches, but in general, your number 4 bat can't be striking. Before the final game, I think he was striking at 115 or something, whereas everyone else in the team was striking at like 180, if not more, some of them, right? So we've got to be careful as fans that, so here's perfect. Frank's just said, if we don't have Hope, we don't win this series. I don't agree with that. Okay, if we didn't have Hope, we didn't win the final game, but Hope's not why we won the series. And I think sometimes people rush to the whole kind of, oh, right, okay, so Hope played a pivotal innings at the end and he was the key. No, he was the key for the final match. And I think that let's not get this twisted. Let's not get this twisted. I know we're all here to say how good Shai Hope is, and he is, but keep it in context as to the importance per game as opposed to importance across the whole series. I don't know. Some people will say that I've got that wrong in saying that, but that's just how I saw it. Because I know we're all on the Shai Hope gravy train. But Eloise says Hope is very capable of scoring 150. Yeah, I agree, Eloise. And I was about to come back at you, Santokie, when you said he can't or he hasn't. I think Santokie's point, though, and I'll let Santokie answer it. I think Santokie's point is that he needs to show that consistently at the international level. Yeah. Don't confuse CPL with international cricket. So he may well be capable of it. That's like saying Spiceman is capable of it,
Yeah.
but can you show it at the top level on a regular basis? Is that what you meant, Santokie?
Yeah. No, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. What I'm emphasizing is international cricket. I think CPL, at least in the modern form, you're not seeing the top level T20 players for the most part. So I think whilst it's good, we saw him for Guyana Amazon Warriors. You know, he hit a rapid century recently. I forgot what game it was. But if you're looking at the quality of the opposition, you have to take that into account. At international level is where it matters. Is where it's going to be critical heading into the World Cup. So I just think Hope. We know he can do it. Obviously, he's a world-class batsman. But I just haven't seen enough of it consistently at West Indies international level for me to be confident that if we're playing England in the World Cup and they post 200, is Hope going to be someone who can keep up with the tempo in the early overs? See, the thing, we need to have a calm head in the team. And someone earlier said he's like Marlon Samuels, but Marlon Samuels could accelerate though. Marlon Samuels could do it for West Indies. He hit big innings. I haven't seen it from Hope. I know he has the potential to do it. So I think in T20s at least, it's fair to criticize him just because, like you said, Mash, he had a good final game. His numbers weren't great heading into that final game. And we haven't seen enough for him. It's not enough for him. I haven't seen enough for him in T20 cricket for West Indies to say Hope's going to be a critical man at the World Cup for the side. Hopefully he can prove me wrong. And like I said, I think the IPL stint will add to his game.
Right. Actually, do you know what? Just as well I kept it. Here's my notes, right, that I made when I went into TalkSport, right? For the third game, Santokie, these were the strike rates for everybody in the third game, by the third game, right? Rovman Powell, 188, Brandon King, 162, Dre, 176, Pooran, 161, Rutherford, 171, Hope, 121, Mayers, 130. That was going into the third game. By the fourth game, but at the end of the fourth game, going into the fifth game, Powell, 177, King, 160, Dre, 189, Pooran, 180, Rutherford, 203, Holder, 257 because of that late thing that he did, and then Hope, 132. This is not so. People listen carefully. Sometimes people just hear Shai Hope's name and they don't actually listen to the argument, right? Neither one of us is saying that Shai Hope isn't good. That's not the argument here, right? We're saying that don't get it confused that because he played the match-winning innings, which was 43 or 43 in the final game, that means that he was the only integral thing to us being good in the series. Like, he played his role, but what are you not going to say that a man who went 132 across the series or whatever it was had a more significant role than Rovman Powell, for example? Like, come on, man. Come on, we got to keep it a buck.
Even someone in the comments said, but Hope scored 50 off 16 balls, the fastest 50 for West Indies in T20s. But that was in 2018. It's a long time ago, 5 years ago, against Bangladesh. So for me, like I said, the recent consistency, like we know we're not saying he's not capable of doing it, but we just haven't seen enough for us to say, for at least me to say, like he's going to be critical in the World Cup, like he's key to the side's success. I think he could be an important cog because of the way he plays. But essentially, it's unlikely he's going to play consistent match-winning knocks just because he doesn't keep up with the strike rate generally.
I think people have confused the point we're making here. You know, I think people just heard the name Shai Hope and assume we're cussing. Anyways,
we're not even saying we want him out of the squad or nothing.
That's what I'm saying. I think people are misunderstanding what we're saying. No one's saying get Hope out the team. Hope is critical to the team. Don't get twisted, people. He's absolutely critical to the team, but there's a nuance to the argument being made here. Anyways, that was Shai Hope, Santokie. So what was that? Pooran obviously did his thing. Don't really need to talk about Nicholas Pooran. Do you know what? Before the series, a man messaged me and said Pooran should be dropped, and that's when I knew that West Indies fans were crazy. You know, that's when I knew we don't have no sense as West Indies fans. So Pooran was Pooran. We don't need to talk about Pooran. He does his job. He's a wild oats sometimes, but he does his job. Rovman Powell, you can't talk about Powell without bigging up his captaincy. Yeah. And actually, we should spend a bit of time on this. For all of Rovman's struggles that he's had in ODI cricket, the one thing that people have to respect is we can say Daren Sammy, we can say good job Desi, or whatever people want to do. But without Powell's assured leadership on the field. You know how with some captains, Santokie, you can tell it's their team, and you can tell that the side is playing in the mold of their captain. You have to give Robin Powell his flowers, Santokie.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's what the side needed. He almost has that. It reminds me a lot of Pollard. He's very vocal and has that sort of dominance when he's on the field. So, like you said, it's a Rotherham Powell side, and I think they were lacking that when obviously Puran took over. So it's great to see him there. And as you said, his tactical abilities, his ability to read the game, and also the innings he played. You know, he can play crucial innings lower down the order. He comes and fires away. I think him being appointed captain of the side has helped his own game as well. And I think, yeah, he's great. Captaincy is overrated. This is why we have a manager.
Oh, Sherwin, you're a hater,
who's
man.
Who's he referring to as the manager, though?
Sherwin's a hater out here.
But yeah, I think the appointment of Powell has been critical to the sort of upturn in our fortunes in the T20 format. And alongside Sammy, they seem to have a great synergy and work well together. So it's all good signs on that front in terms of captaincy and leadership going into the World Cup. Yeah,
so that's Powell at 5. Now, let's get to this. For you, Santokie, and all the Guyanese who are in the chat. So, Santokie, Hetmyer played the first 2, carried on his dreadful form that he's had since he was recalled for the India series, whether ODIs, whether T20s, he has basically looked like, I don't know where Shimron's head is at, but I don't know. Let's not speculate. You know what I will say about Shimron is his fielding was good. So let me give Hetty his due. In the field, he was a very good boundary fielder, but you're not in the team to be a specialist fielder, right? So Hetty flopped the first 2, and I was surprised actually, Santokie. I was glad, but I was surprised they actually dropped him, because my whole concern, Hetty, is once he's dropped, will he lose his smile and say, boy, I'm not coming back? Now, anyways, he was replaced by another guy, Shafane Rutherford. And to be fair, I thought Shafane played some good innings. He was a bit impetuous, and probably some of his dismissals, he gave them away when already well set. But he did enough for me to say, Hetty, you can't come back in this side.
Yeah, I think in his 3 games, what did he score? Like 29, 30, 36, or
something like that. Yeah, it was like a 20, definitely a 30. There's a 29 and 36. I don't know what he got in the last one.
So he contributed. He got some runs on the board, which is a lot more than Hetty had been doing. Hetty just looked out of form, out of confidence with the bat. As you said, with the fielding, he took some really good catches. He looked happy in the field. But you said you're not picked to be a boundary specialist. So if you're basing it on the bat, it was a deserved drop for Hetty. Rutherford coming in as well and scoring those runs. He's going to start in the Australia series because he did enough to carry on that form. And I can't see Hetty making it back into the side unless, he has an explosive IPL, puts on the runs and forces his name into the hat. But then, like you said, Mash, with Hetty, we know off the field as well, how is he going to take this drop? Is he not going to want to play for West Indies again? Or is he got? So there's a lot of factors with Hetmyer, but I just think there's a lot to work on. I still think it's going to be a talking point in 7 months, regardless of what happens. But for now, Rutherford deserves space in that 11.
Our next assignment is Australia. I assume, even with Hetty's bad form, surely they still pick him in a squad going forward. Surely they still have to invest in him. Now, this is a weird question to ask you, Santokie, because I'm assuming Hetty will play in either the South Africa SA20 or that international 20 league in UAE. I'm assuming he's going to play in one of them. As things stand right now on the 24th of December, if Hetty is called up to the limited overs side to go to Australia, do you think he'll get on a plane to go there?
No, I don't think he'll get on a plane to go there.
You reckon he won't go?
Australia's a long way to go if you're not guaranteed to be in the 11 and when you've got franchise deals lined up as well. I just think all the ingredients are there for him to not go.
say for argument's sake, he doesn't go to Australia. Say he's picked, and some kind of reason presents itself whereby Hetty can't go there, even if he was like crazy enough to say, "Boy, I'm just unavailable." If that happened, Santokie, bear in mind it would be 1 year. Well, no, was it? When did it last happen? No, it was a World Cup. Yeah, so it'd be like a year since the last time. Would you then write him off and say, you know what, mate, we're just moving on past you now? Like, enough, we're moving on.
Well, yeah, Jason Holder said in his press release that they were told by Cricket West Indies they had to be available for the England and Australia series to be considered for the World Cup. So that could be something that, ultimately leads to Hetmyer going to Australia. But if Hetmyer doesn't go, then he's definitely not going to be in the World Cup. And then after that, who knows what's going on? If we'll see Hetmyer play for West Indies. If all that doesn't happen, hopefully we know what he can do. We know he's a talented player at the heart of it. So hopefully we do see him go to Australia and at least be around that selection. Kimo Paul should get in and looking for Australia. See, the thing is, Obed McCoy, is it an injury issue or what's going on with Obed McCoy? Because Obed McCoy for me is, up there with Alzari in terms of being a strike bowler. His performances, we know he's had injuries this year. So I don't know if that's affecting sort of his current selection. I don't know if you know any more about him, Ash.
They didn't. So this is the thing about West Indies press releases. You notice how, Santokie, sometimes in West Indies press releases, they'll be like, yeah, so this and such player isn't there because they're unavailable because of X. And then there'll be other players like an Obed McCoy who's dropped. You're like, so where's he gone? And they won't tell you nothing. Like, do you know what I mean? So I don't know. We always assume it's because Obed is injured, but no one's actually said anything. I would assume that Obed will play in the SA20. You would assume because he's part of what? Is he part of the Royals franchise? I think. Is he Royals? I think he's the Royals. So you would assume he'll be part of the Pal Royals or something like that. Here's why they have to invest in Obed, because the one thing that was clearly missing, or is clearly missing, I should say, for this West Indies T20 side, they don't have a left-arm seamer, and they need one. For variety purposes, they need a left-arm seamer. In the same way how England had Reece Topley, who was able to occasionally bring it back into the right-handers or take it away, challenge the left-handers outside edge, etc. You need a left-arm seam bowler for some, not to play necessarily, but to be an option on the bench, right? We have two, Sheldon Cottrell or Obed McCoy. Neither one was picked. I would be shocked. Javed's just said, what about Dominic Drakes? I mean, okay, but I would be shocked if we don't try and include Obed leading into the World Cup, because it doesn't make sense to me not to include Obed. As for Kimo Paul, Santokie, like he's all like he never gets. There's never. Do you know what? I feel sorry for Kimo Paul because he never has momentum, because he's always getting an injury when he does seem to get a bit of momentum.
Yeah, I think with Kimo, we saw him in CPL for Guyana Amazon Warriors. It wasn't spectacular. He took a few wickets here and there. I don't think it was enough to get a West Indies call up. He's had injuries and issues, which has meant we haven't seen him play a run of games across any formats, really. So I think Kimo Paul's handy. He can take wickets with his medium pace. He's got talent with the bat, but I just think if we're looking predominantly at World Cup the next year, 7 months, Kimo Paul's not going to get a look in. But, he's still young. So long term, hopefully we can see him get back that fitness and consistency and make his way back into the West Indies side. But for now, in terms of World Cup selections in 7 months, Kimo Paul's not even in the equation for me.
So we end with the final few bowlers. We didn't do in the end, people, we didn't do the player ratings because we kind of just covered the players in general.
Yeah.
So Moti, we said it at the top, Santokie, but Gudakesh Moti, what's his stats? 4 matches, 5 wickets at 24 apiece, economy 7.37. Akil Hussain, 6 wickets at 26 apiece, economy 7.80. Finally, Santokie put into bed all of the arguments. Do you remember everyone kept saying you can't have two left arm slow orthodox bowlers in the team? And everyone, like you and me, would be like, yeah, but why? And no one would ever come up with an actual explanation as to why you can't have both Akil Hussain and Gudakesh Moti in the same team, right? Here's the thing, Santokie. I think we have simply lucked out on Moti and Akil Hussain being in the same team. That was never the plan. that was never their intention, and now both of them have played themselves into a situation where you just can't drop them. Where do you stand on it, Santokie?
Yeah, I don't think there was any plan. I think Akil Hussein was the guy they were going to go for as that slow left armer spin, and then have probably Yannick as the leg spinner to complement him. I just think Moti, I'm not sure even how he got in. Moti just had a run in the white ball side and has done well. So I think they thought, you know what, if they're both doing well, let's just keep them in. And they've both worked in tandem to do well together. So you could say it could be slightly one-dimensional at a World Cup. I mean, teams might know how to exploit them if they're both doing the same. But for now, they're both taking wickets. They both look confident. They both know the pitches across the Caribbean inside out. So you stick with them. And they were real positive, especially Moti, real positive in that tour. And for me, Moti, I tweeted it out as an example of where I think the selectors have got it right. Because when Moti was picked for the Pakistan tour in 2021, he was a good player, you know, for guy in the Amazon Warriors. He was known in the region, but you would never assume he was like a standout spinner. Within the past 2 years, we've seen him really develop to the point where you could almost say he was almost probably a tier below like world-class level, but he's a very, very good spin bowler now for West Indies. And he looks confident. He's developing his game. He's got variations. So he's someone we have seen develop in West Indies colours over the last 2 years. And Akil Hussain has obviously kept up his quality as well. So in the spin department, we actually look very, very comfortable in terms of that. It'd be good to have a leg spinner like a Yannick or Hayden Walsh, get some game time in case we can use them as an option for leg spin. But in terms of our predominant spinners, Moti and Akil Hussain, I have no issues with them going to the World Cup.
Yeah, 100%. It'll be very interesting to see the next time we play ODIs, which I think is also in Australia. It'll be very interesting to see now if they're like, well, maybe we can have Moti and Akil in ODIs. As well. I don't see any reason not to. Now, whilst you were explaining your point, Santokie, I think it was Fireball. Let me see if I can find the point he was making. Every other team, I think you made reference to it earlier on as well. Every other team, here we go. Errol, it was Errol. Errol says we don't have the luxury to pick and choose with our spinners. This left arm leggy combo isn't something we can do and not go for licks. So every other team will go into the World Cup with a leg spin bowler. We obviously have Hayden Walsh or Yannick Carrier, who we could pick. But my argument is, Santokie, you are far more likely to get control and even wickets with Akil Hussain and Gudakesh Moti than you would with one of Akil Hussain and Gudakesh Moti and then a leg spinner. That's my personal take on it. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I think there's no point forcing it and forcing a Hayden Walsh or Yannick to play just because they're a leg spinner. I think you go with the quality of the player and the form they're bringing. So I would be much more comfortable because even if Akil and Moti, like you say, if they're not taking wickets, we know they can control the runs as well on these pitches. So I would still go with that. Like I said, it couldn't be seen as being one-dimensional, and teams will find out how to play that. But there's no point picking Yannick because he's a leg spinner and then he goes for 45 for 4 overs, for instance, like just taking licks. So unless Yannick or Hayden Walsh, I don't even know if they'll get selected for the Australia. They probably won't get selected for the Australia series. I don't know how they would prove themselves to kind of make their way back in. So I can just see, again, looking towards the World Cup, us starting with Moti and Akil Hussain as our 2 spinners.
And then finally, Santokie, we end with Seam. So Alzari Joseph started the first 3 games and was expensive. He took 6 wickets, in fairness, at 24, but his economy was 12.43. And after the 3rd game, they said they were resting him, which was fine. We've been bowling Alzari till he can't walk no more. So they said we're resting him. They then utilised both O'Shane Thomas and Matthew Ford in the final 2 games. In the 4th one, Matthew Ford bowled 3 overs for 54 runs, going at 18's economy, right? O'Shane Thomas bowled his 4 overs for 36 at an economy of 9. And that sounds like O'Shane took tap, but he actually bowled really well, to be fair to O'Shane Thomas, whereas Matthew Ford obviously got absolutely destroyed in the 4th T20. Are you worried, Santokie, about our fast bowling options? Now, what I mean by that is we have some right arm fast medium bowlers in Romario Shepherd, Jason Holder, even Ford isn't quick, and then Andre Russell. So some all-rounders, right? Alzari Joseph is our only genuine quick who starts in the team. we have a question mark over O'Shane Thomas. I know we brought him back for injury, but he didn't play any games. So he's played one game, T20, for West Indies since the summer. Would you like to see O'Shane and Alzari play in the same team?
Yeah, I think it's worth a shot to try that combination. I'm pretty sure in all our World Cup previews for the past two years, we've always said with West Indies, we don't have an out-and-out pace bowler who can support Alzari, and that's still the case now. We're heavily reliant on Alzari across all formats, come to think of it, in terms of pace. Yeah, also, we have a typical CCP, coming towards the end of the episode. We forgot to say like, share, subscribe. How many people are even on this live at the moment, Mesh?
There's 242 in the live, which is amazing given it's Christmas Eve. That means 242 people are neglecting their families to watch us neglecting our families. Craziness right now.
But yeah, Mesh, I think so Matthew Ford, obviously, he took licks in this series, but he's learning, he's young. And again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about Shea Hope. It's all right for people to say, all right, yeah, he scored for Guyana Amazon Warriors. There's a big difference between franchise cricket, unless it's the IPL or a top level one. There's a big difference between franchise cricket and international cricket. Matthew Ford's done really well at the Lanka Premier League, at CPL, the Canada T20, but there's a big jump out of international cricket, and we saw that. I'm sure he'll learn from his mistakes and he'll develop his game going forward. But I don't think Matthew Ford, I think it's too early for him to be in contention for the World Cup. So Matthew Ford is a development case long term. I'd like to see O'Shane and Alzari. I wouldn't be confident of O'Shane leading the line at a World Cup, but we just don't have any other options, Mash. And I think it was telling of the IPL shortlist. I think there was 22 players picked. I think fast bowling wise, Shamar Joseph got shortlisted just because there's not anyone who offers that sort of pace. And people were talking about Shamar Joseph being an option. And I think that's mad considering he's played like 3 T20s, professional T20s in his career. But it reflects just the lack of options we have to support Alzari. If Alzari Joseph gets injured in the lead up to the World Cup, who do we have? What are we even picking? So it's a big concern for me, and I don't know how we'll fill it. Obviously, we're hoping Obed McCoy can come back, and that would sort of solve a lot of issues. But other than that, we don't really have many pacey options who we can draw on.
And I'm really glad you just said that. So that point you just said, Santokie, is why, as great as the 3-2 victory was against England, and as good as it made all of us feel, my one concern, well, I've got lots of concerns, but my one major concern is, what if someone gets injured? What if one of our key players get injured? How strong or how deep is our strength in depth if somebody key was to get injured, right? So before I come to wrap it all up, Santokie, there was a few super chats which you went past. First one from Brian. So Brian says, happy holidays. You've shown great commitment being here tonight. So are Carrier and Walsh absolute non-starters World Cup consideration at this point? I mean, we kind of covered that. I'm not saying absolutely not, but I think the better point and I'll put it back on you, Brian, is say you took one of them, right? Who's not getting in a 15-man World Cup squad for one of those two? Bear in mind the 15 that were just picked for this series is probably as close to the 15 that you would expect, right? For the World Cup squad. Who would drop out for Carrier or Walsh? And at this point in time, I'm not sure who that would be. But that doesn't mean we should absolutely rule them out, particularly if there was injuries. But thank you for the super chat, Brian. Much appreciated. And Winston sent a super chat as well. He didn't even put a comment. So, but just bigging up Winston as well. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the super chat, Winston. Much appreciated. So, Santokie, I'm going to just end it with this. Big up Basil Butcher Jr. He's also in the big chat. Up, Basil, you need to come on to the show actually for a part 2. There's been a lot of people cussing me, saying how comes we didn't talk about Colin Croft and specific Guyanese bowlers as well. So you need to come in for a part 2. And actually, Santokie, given that Joe Solomon passed recently, there's even an argument to say that we should be doing some kind of heritage episode around Joe Solomon as well. So Basil, hit me up. You've got my number anyways. Hit me up, Basil, and we can have a conversation. But so these are the points that I leave with Santokie. Fantastic 3-2 win. 3rd T20 series victory in a year. Beating South Africa, beating India, beating England. Things look good. Santokie says Fred Santokie. Santokie says you got to put West Indies in the conversation
You have to,
when when it comes to the World Cup next year. And I see Santokie's point, although I will just accept getting out the group stage. But this is what I would say, Santokie. These are the following issues that I've identified are potential problems or could be potential problems 7 months from now. One, the team hasn't yet identified who their sixth bowler is if one of the front five. So in all of those games, we basically played with 5 frontline bowlers. The one game we turned to our sixth bowler was when Shafane Rutherford got licked down by Phil Salt or whoever it was who licked him down, right? And there was one game where Mayers bowled one over and actually did all right. So there's a sixth bowler issue as to who does the backing up if one of the 5 gets licked. There's a leg spin issue only in the sense of most top tier T20 side, international T20 sides pick a leg spinner. We probably aren't going to. Will that be a problem? There's a fast bowling issue in so much as Alzari Joseph is our only quick who gets into the team. Do West Indies have to make space for O'Shane Thomas to also play alongside Alzari Joseph? I think they're afraid to do that, but there's an argument to say you need 2 quicks. There's a left arm seam option issue. Obed McCoy has lost form, but our attack looks too samey. We've got 2 left arm slow orthodox bowlers and then a cadre of right arm medium fast all rounders. I refuse to believe that a top side would have a team like that in their bowling attack without some level of variety. And then finally, Santokie, we have an opener issue. As things stand right now, we could be going into a home World Cup with one of Johnson Charles or Spiceman opening due to lack of options. Will Desmond Haynes pick up the phone, find Evan Lewis's number or Daren Sammy and go break bread with him and find a way to reincorporate Evan Lewis back into our T20 side? If we do not, then we have an opening issue that will still be an issue this time come the World Cup. Good synopsis or not, Santokie?
Yeah, I think that was the perfect synopsis, Mash. And like we said at the top of the show, we weren't saying it was a 5-star performance for West Indies. It was great we managed to get the 3-2 win, but there are big issues to address. The one thing I will say is, because this year has been, for most sides in the world, focused so much on ODI cricket, I do think a lot of sides in the world are having similar, sort of questions about their team and the makeup of their team and issues to address, and not enough bilaterals between now and the World Cup. So I think as well, that kind of plays into West Indies' advantages in that it's not just us with these questions, but we've got the added advantage of, well, it could be a disadvantage, as you said, Mash. Playing at home, if the crowd gets a bit ferocious, it's either going to spur our team on, or it could make them go down bad. So we'll see how that goes. But like we said at the top of the show, great way to end the year, at least with a series win over England, the T20 format, giving us some douse of optimism for 2024 in what has been a down bad year for West Indian cricket. And you know what, Mash? We haven't even mentioned the down bad story of the week with Jamaica Talawar's getting ditched.
Listen, we're gonna have to find some time between Christmas Day and the New Year. And also, people, we haven't forgotten that we need to do our 2023 awards show as well before the year is out. That's gonna be hecka funny, Santokie, because so many down bad things happen. But the Talawars have quit CPL. Kyron Pollard has jumped sides to go and help England now. So there's a whole heap of things we haven't even addressed that need to be addressed as well. So we might need to do a Netflix series just covering those 2 things, Santokie. Because in fairness, Santokie, that Talawars leaving the CPL thing, that's an episode we need to cover. Because there's a big conversation around Jamaica and cricket and CPL, and so people, we haven't forgotten. We've got some episodes loading.
I think when it was previously, when we had Antigua Hawksbills, when they were removed from CPL, I think, no disrespect to Antigua, it was kind of like, oh well, it's Antigua, it's a smaller nation. Whereas I think with Jamaica Talawars, the legacy they've had in CPL, the fact is Jamaica, the fact they're just done, and the owner they're still keeping the same owner.
That's what I'm saying.
He's just changing over to Antigua. So there's obviously mad issues. We'll try to see if we can get some guests on, but definitely that's something we need to deep dive in. I think it wouldn't do justice to just add it onto this episode. It needs a full dedicated episode itself. So we'll be dropping that probably within the next week.
Imagine though, just as we end, Jamaica are the second most successful team in CPL history, and they just turned around CPL and went, "Nah, we're not doing this no more." That's crazy that is.
Big question for you to end the show. Who are you going to be supporting in CPL now? Is it Guyanese Mash out here?
Nah. I was already jumping towards Trinbago Knight Riders as it was. So now it's official. I'm now officially a Trinbago Knight Riders fan. I've jumped ship. Talawaz has said no more, so I'm saying, you know what? Knight Riders out here. That's who I am, bro. That's who I am from now on.
Machel, no more reggae, you know. It's a soca thing out here now. But guys, thank you so much for everyone who's abandoned their families and loved ones at this time to hear us ramble about West Indies cricket. The love is there. So on behalf of Caribbean Cricket Podcast, we'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year if you don't catch us on any other live shows, but we'll be sure to be dropping some content within the next few days. So hopefully you will be around for that. So thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoy your afternoons, evenings, late nights, wherever you are in the world, and enjoy that West Indies victory over England. Mash, I'll pass it over to you for the final words.
Yeah. For those listening, you by the time you get to this part, you'll know that I dropped this on the audio platforms as well. So thank you for everybody throughout the year who's also listened to us on audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to the audios as well. As ever, for those watching on YouTube, like, share, subscribe on the way out. Tell people, tell a friend to tell a friend. We'll be back with some content after Christmas Day, and look out for our award show for 2023. I've been Machel St. Patrick Hewitt. Santokie's been Santokie. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.